Welcome back, and thank you for tuning in to HK Cheating Stories. We appreciate each and every one of you joining us. Where in the world are you watching from? Let us know in the comments. Now, let's get the story started. For 9 years, I thought I had the perfect life, a loving wife, 2 beautiful kids, a home filled with laughter. I worked hard, I provided, and I never once doubted the woman I shared my life with. But all it took was one small discovery. Something so insignificant at first glance, to shatter everything. A tiny foil strip on the bathroom floor. A piece of a lie I never saw coming. My name is James, and this is the story of how I uncovered the biggest betrayal of my life. A story of deception, revenge, and ultimately, freedom. The morning light streamed through the blinds, casting long slanted beams across the bedroom floor. I was groggy, barely awake, as I made my way to the bathroom, rubbing the sleep from my eyes. The house was quiet. Lucy had already left for work, and the kids were still sleeping. It was a rare moment of peace, or so I thought. As I stepped inside, something on the carpet caught my eye. A small glint, a flicker of reflected light. Instinctively, I stopped, my breath hitching. I crouched down and reached for it. A tiny foil circle, thin, metallic, almost blending in with the beige rug. At first, I thought it was just a piece of trash. But when I turned it over, my stomach tightened. It was the backing of a pill strip. For a second, my mind blanked, trying to place where I'd seen something like this before. Then it hit me. Birth control pills. I frowned, turning the foil between my fingers. It had a marking, Tuesday. Yesterday. I glanced at the calendar on the wall. Today was Wednesday. Why was there a birth control pill in my bathroom? My first instinct was to dismiss it. Maybe it wasn't what I thought. Maybe Lucy had some medical reason to take them again. But as quickly as the thought appeared, I shoved it away. I knew my wife. I knew her body as well as my own. She had never needed medication for anything. And most importantly, I had a vasectomy 2 years ago. I stood there, my heart pounding, staring at the tiny foil like it held the answer to a question I wasn't sure I wanted to ask. Lucy had no reason to be on birth control. Unless. The thought slammed into me like a freight train. My pulse pounded in my ears. Unless she was sleeping with someone else. I forced myself to take a deep breath. No, I couldn't jump to conclusions. There had to be another explanation. There had to be. But the doubt had already taken root. A cold sweat broke across my back as I scanned the bathroom. If the foil was here, then the pills had to be close by. My hands moved before my brain caught up, searching through the drawers, behind the mirror, inside the cabinet. Nothing. I hesitated for only a moment before crouching down and pulling open the cupboard beneath the sink. I pushed aside a box of tampons, a few bottles of aspirin, and there they were. A half-empty strip of birth control pills, tucked neatly behind a pack of painkillers. I swallowed hard, my fingers trembling as I picked them up. They were the same brand she used years ago, before we decided to stop having kids. The same kind she'd tossed away when I scheduled my vasectomy. I stared at them, my mind spinning in 1,000 different directions. I could still hear Lucy's voice from 2 years ago. It'll be so much easier this way, James. No more pills, no more worrying. We're done having kids, aren't we? I had agreed. I went through with the surgery because I trusted her. I trusted that we were in this together. So why the hell was she taking them again? There was only one possible reason. I stood there in the bathroom, gripping the pill strip so tightly it crumpled in my fist. The world around me felt like it was tilting, shifting under my feet. My mind screamed at me to confront her, to call her right now and demand answers. But another voice, quieter, colder, stopped me. No. If she was cheating, she would lie. She would cry, make excuses, tell me whatever I wanted to hear. And I wasn't going to be that guy, the fool who believed a liar's sob story. I needed proof. I placed everything back exactly as I found it, making sure not to leave a trace of my search. Then, I left the bathroom, my face carefully blank, my hands steady. But inside, I was already unraveling. That day at work, I barely heard a word anyone said. My mind was a constant loop of questions I couldn't answer. How long had this been going on? Who was he? Was it someone from her office? Someone I knew? And the worst question of all, were the kids even mine? The thought made my stomach twist violently. I pushed my chair back and stood abruptly, ignoring the concerned glance from my assistant, Michelle. James? You okay? She asked. I forced a tight smile. Yeah, just something I need to take care of. I walked out, my hands already pulling out my phone. By the time I reached my car, I was searching online, my fingers moving on instinct. Discrete DNA test kits. How to check paternity without them knowing. I clicked on the first link. I had no proof yet, no evidence, but I had a feeling my life was about to change forever. I drove home that evening with my mind in chaos. The usual sounds of traffic, the distant hum of the radio, the steady rhythm of my own breathing. Everything felt distant, like I was floating outside of myself. My fingers gripped the steering wheel so tightly they ached, but I barely noticed. My thoughts were consumed by one thing. Lucy. The pills. The possibility that my entire life was a lie. When I pulled into the driveway, the house looked the same as always. The porch light glowed warmly, the curtains were drawn, and inside, I could see the soft flicker of the television. A perfectly normal, peaceful home. But now, it felt different. Tainted. I stepped inside, forcing my face into a neutral expression. The last thing I needed was to alert Lucy. If she was cheating, she had already fooled me for God knows how long. I couldn't let her know I was onto her. Not yet. Hey, honey. She greeted me from the couch, her legs tucked under her. She looked up from the TV and smiled, just like she always did. I had kissed that smile every morning, held that face in my hands, loved that woman with every ounce of my being. But now, I didn't know who I was looking at. Hey, I replied, keeping my voice steady. Long day at work. Ugh, the worst, she groaned, stretching. I swear, my boss is on some kind of power trip lately. He kept us late in a meeting for no reason. I forced myself to nod, to pretend I was listening, but inside, I was screaming. Her boss. I had no proof yet, but suddenly, his name burned in my mind. Mark Watson. I had met him a handful of times, corporate events, company parties. He was charming, confident, successful, older than Lucy by about 10 years. Married. And now, I couldn't shake the thought that he might also be the father of my children. I felt sick. Lucy continued talking, oblivious to the storm raging inside me. I'll be right back, I muttered, moving toward the bedroom. Once inside, I locked the door behind me and pulled out my phone. My hands were shaking as I navigated to the website I had found earlier. Discrete DNA test kits. Order now. I didn't hesitate. I ordered 2 kits, one for each of the kids. I selected express shipping. They'd be here by Friday. That wasn't enough. I needed more than DNA results. I needed to know who, when, where. I needed to see the truth with my own eyes. I opened another tab and started searching. Miniature surveillance cameras, voice recorders, GPS trackers, phone cloning software. I didn't know exactly what I was looking for, but I bought it all. If Lucy was hiding something, I was going to find it. When I emerged from the bedroom, I felt like a different man. Less than an hour ago, I had been her loving husband. Now, I was a man on a mission. Lucy was in the kitchen, pouring a glass of wine. She turned when she heard me. Want a glass? I stared at her for a beat too long before shaking my head. Nah, I'm good. She gave me a look but didn't press. Later that night, as she lay beside me in bed, sleeping peacefully, I stayed awake, staring at the ceiling. Who was she texting when I wasn't looking? Was she sneaking off to see him during lunch breaks? Had she ever brought him here, into our home? I clenched my jaw, my fists tightening against the sheets. I would find out. I had to. Friday arrived, and with it, my packages. I left work early and drove home, my heart pounding the entire way. The kids were with the nanny, Lucy was still at work. I had the house to myself. I set everything up methodically. A tiny camera in the bedroom, positioned just right to capture the bed. Another in the bathroom, where I had found the pill strip. A voice recorder in her purse. Another in her car. Then, the hardest part, collecting the DNA samples. That night, as I tucked the kids into bed, I fought back the emotions threatening to overwhelm me. My son, Ethan, looked up at me sleepily. Love you, Daddy, he murmured. I swallowed hard. Love you too, buddy. I waited until they were deep asleep. Then, with careful precision, I swabbed the inside of their cheeks, making sure to be gentle. They never even stirred. I placed the samples in the provided envelopes, sealed them, and set them aside to mail in the morning. Step 1 was done. Now, I just had to wait. By Saturday night, I had my first real lead. As I was making dinner, Lucy disappeared into our bedroom. That wasn't unusual, but something told me to check the camera later. When I did, my blood ran cold. She had taken out a second phone, one I had never seen before. She typed a message, then hid the phone inside the air vent. A second phone. A secret phone. My hands clenched into fists. She was hiding something, and I was going to uncover every last piece of it. Monday morning, I woke up before Lucy. I lay still, staring at the ceiling, listening to the rhythmic sound of her breathing. My mind was already racing, planning my next move. The second phone. That was the crack in the wall, the first real proof that she was hiding something from me. I had checked the vent last night after she fell asleep. The phone was gone. She must have taken it with her in the morning, then returned it at night. Smart. Careful, but not careful enough. I had a plan. Lucy stirred beside me, stretching. "Morning," she murmured, her voice laced with sleep. "Morning," I replied, forcing my tone to stay casual. I turned to her, pressing a quick kiss to her forehead. I needed her to believe that everything was normal, that I was still the clueless husband she had been fooling all this time. I got up and went through my usual routine. Shower, breakfast with the kids, kiss Lucy goodbye before she left for work. As soon as she pulled out of the driveway, I sprang into action. I retrieved the memory cards from the hidden cameras and plugged them into my laptop. My fingers tapped impatiently against the desk as I fast-forwarded through the footage. Then I saw it. Saturday evening. Lucy stood in our bedroom, dressed in her robe, her hair still damp from the shower. She reached into the vent and pulled out the second phone. She typed something, her fingers moving quickly over the screen. Then, a pause. She smiled, a soft, intimate expression I hadn't seen in years. My stomach twisted. I watched as she bit her lip, hesitated, then took a picture of herself. She adjusted the robe slightly, revealing just enough skin to make my blood boil. She hit send. I felt like I was going to be sick. I rewound, zoomed in. I couldn't see the name of the recipient, but I didn't need to. I already knew. Mark Watson, her boss. I clenched my fists so tightly my nails bit into my palms. I forced myself to breathe, to stay calm. This wasn't enough. I needed more. I had to get into that phone. That night, I waited. I pretended everything was fine, just like I always did. Lucy was cheerful, affectionate even. She kissed me before bed, curled up against my side like nothing was wrong. I held her. I kissed her back. And I hated myself for it. At some point, she fell asleep. I waited another hour, listening to her steady breathing, making sure she was deep under. Then I moved. Slowly, carefully, I slipped out of bed and padded toward the vent. My hands trembled as I reached inside. The phone was there. I exhaled in relief and pulled it out, cradling it in my palm like it was a live bomb. My heart pounded as I pressed the power button. A lock screen flashed. 4-digit passcode. I tried her usual combinations. Our anniversary. Her birthday. The kids' birthdays. Nothing. Think James. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the screen, my mind racing. Then, I remembered something. Lucy always used the same PIN for her debit card. A stupid, lazy habit I had teased her about before. I typed it in. The screen unlocked. My breath caught. I was in. A rush of adrenaline surged through me as I scrolled through her messages. The conversation was under a simple letter, M. But I didn't need to open it to know who it was. Mark Watson. I tapped the thread and immediately felt my stomach drop. The messages stretched back for months. Months. Some were casual. A joke. A work complaint. But others. I felt like I was drowning as I read them. I miss you. Last night was incredible. I can't stop thinking about you. I want you so bad. When can we sneak away again? Then, the pictures. Some were tame. A selfie at work. A picture of her coffee cup. Others weren't. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to keep scrolling. And then, the final dagger. I wish I could tell James the truth. He doesn't deserve this, Lucy. I know, but I can't. Not yet. It would ruin everything. I stared at the words, my vision blurring. Ruin everything? I had already lost everything. I just didn't know it until now. My hands shook as I backed out of the messages. I checked the call log. They talked every day, sometimes multiple times a day. I scrolled further. Voicemails. I pressed play. Mark's voice filled the quiet room. Hey, baby. Just thinking about you. Can't wait to see you again. Hopefully soon. I miss you. My jaw clenched so hard I thought my teeth might crack. I turned off the phone, carefully placed it back in the vent, and crawled back into bed. Lucy was still asleep, completely unaware that her world was about to burn. I stared at the ceiling, my heart pounding. Now I had proof. Now I had everything I needed. And I was going to make them both pay. Monday morning dragged on like a slow-motion car crash. I sat in my office, my hands resting on the desk, staring blankly at the laptop screen. The coffee in front of me had gone cold, untouched. My inbox was flooded with emails, but I couldn't bring myself to care. I had spent the entire weekend pretending to be the perfect husband, acting as if I wasn't suffocating under the weight of what I had uncovered. Every time Lucy kissed me, every time she laughed, every time she touched me, I had to fight the urge to recoil. She had no idea I had read her texts, listened to her lover's voice whispering sweet nothings into her ear. And now, I was about to face another brutal truth. The DNA test results were coming in today. I reached for my phone with a shaky hand, checking my email for the 100th time. Still nothing. I exhaled sharply, forcing myself to focus. The surveillance was in place, the evidence was piling up, but I couldn't make a move until I knew for sure. I wasn't just dealing with a cheating wife. I was dealing with the possibility that my entire fatherhood was a lie. A soft knock on my door jolted me from my thoughts. I looked up to see Michelle, my assistant, standing there, her brow furrowed in concern. "James, you all right?" I hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, just a lot on my mind." She stepped inside, closing the door behind her. "You've been out of it all morning. You barely said 2 words in the meeting. This isn't like you." I rubbed a hand over my face, feeling the exhaustion settle deep into my bones. Michelle had been my assistant for 5 years. She knew me better than anyone at this company. "Something happened," she stated, rather than asked. I debated telling her. But then, my phone vibrated. My breath caught. The email had arrived. Michelle must have noticed the change in my expression. She stepped closer. "James." I swallowed hard and opened the email. The results loaded slowly, each line appearing like a hammer to my chest. Paternity analysis. Probability of paternity, 0%. I blinked. Read it again. Then again. My hands clenched around the phone. 0%. Neither of them were mine. I couldn't breathe. My chest felt tight, like a weight was pressing down on it. The room spun. My fingers trembled as I scrolled down. Both children. Not mine. But they shared the same biological father. Mark. The world around me faded. The voices outside my office, the hum of my computer, even Michelle's presence, it all became background noise. "James." Michelle's voice was softer now, cautious. I exhaled sharply and handed her my phone. She took it, her eyes scanning the screen. Her lips parted slightly, and for a moment, she didn't say anything. Then, she looked up at me, her expression unreadable. "James, I'm so sorry." I let out a hollow laugh, but there was no humor in it. "Yeah, me too." I stood abruptly, pushing my chair back with a screech. I needed air. I needed to move. I paced the office, running a hand through my hair, my mind a mess of rage, grief, and disbelief. 9 years. 9 goddamn years. I had changed their diapers, rocked them to sleep, held them when they cried, called myself their father, all while Lucy smiled in my face and let me believe the lie. "James, sit down," Michelle said gently. "Breathe." "I can't," I muttered. My hands were shaking. "I can't just." I stopped myself before I said something reckless. I forced myself to inhale, then exhale. Michelle hesitated before stepping closer, placing a hand on my arm. "Listen to me. You need to think clearly. I know this is hell, but you can't afford to break down now." I met her eyes. She wasn't wrong. Breaking down wasn't an option. Not yet. I took another breath, letting the fury settle into something colder, sharper. "I need more evidence." Michelle nodded, as if she had expected that response. "Then we get more evidence. We do this smart. You have proof of the affair, but if you want to take them both down, you need a solid plan." I clenched my jaw. "I already have a plan." She studied me for a moment, then gave a slow nod. "Good. Then let's make sure it works." I picked up my phone and dialed the number I had saved last week. A private investigator. It was time to find out just how deep this betrayal went. The rage inside me had settled into something else. Something colder. Sharper. A purpose. I spent the next few hours in my office, methodically going over my next steps. The DNA results had shattered any lingering hope I had left. My children weren't mine. My wife had been lying to me for nearly a decade. And now, I was done playing the fool. I wasn't going to cry. I wasn't going to scream. I was going to destroy them. Michelle sat across from me, quietly watching as I jotted down notes, my movements controlled, calculated. She had always been good at reading me, But right now, even she didn't dare interrupt. Finally, she leaned forward. So what's the next move? I looked up at her. I'm going nuclear. Her lips pressed into a thin line. All right, then we need to make sure you do this right. I picked up my phone and dialed Rachel, the divorce lawyer I had contacted earlier. She answered on the second ring. James, I was wondering when you'd call back, she said smoothly. Are you ready to talk options? I already know my option, I replied. I want to burn everything down. She chuckled. I was hoping you'd say that. Come in this afternoon, and we'll go over the details. I hung up and looked at Michelle. Let's go. Rachel's office was sleek and modern, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline. She was a woman who exuded confidence, the kind of lawyer you hired when you didn't just want to win. You wanted to make the other person suffer. She wasted no time. You have 3 routes here, James, she said, folding her hands on the desk. 1, you do nothing. Stay married. Pretend this never happened. That's off the table, I assume? I clenched my jaw. Completely. Good, she said, her lips curving slightly. Option 2, an amicable divorce. Split assets, co-parent, let her walk away with dignity. I leaned forward, my voice cold. She doesn't deserve dignity. Rachel's smirk widened. Then option 3, full-scale war. We contest paternity, sue for fraud, expose her affair publicly, and ensure she walks away with nothing. Michelle exhaled beside me. That's a lot of firepower. It's exactly what I want, I said. Rachel nodded. Then let's talk strategy. She pulled out a file and flipped through the papers. First, we make sure she gets nothing in the divorce. Normally, spouses are entitled to assets, but since your prenuptial agreement protects your company holdings, we need to move the rest of your wealth before she can touch it. Michelle and I exchanged a look. We already started that process, Michelle said. Rachel raised an eyebrow, impressed. Good. That brings us to the next step, public exposure. If we time this right, we can serve her divorce papers at work, ensuring her entire office knows what she did. I let out a slow breath. Perfect. And Mark? Michelle asked. Rachel's grin was almost predatory. That's where it gets fun. His company has an anti-fraternization policy, correct? Yes, I confirmed. Then we sue him for emotional distress and professional misconduct, she said. He'll lose his job, his pension, his reputation. If his wife doesn't already know, she will by the end of the week. I felt something dark and satisfied settle inside me. Do it. Rachel nodded. One last thing, you need to get her out of the house. Legally, she can claim it's a marital home, which means we have to act fast. I thought for a moment. If I make her leave voluntarily, does that help? Rachel smiled. Oh, absolutely. If she willingly vacates, it strengthens our case to keep the house in the settlement. Then I'll handle it, I said. Michelle shot me a glance. James, I have a plan, I assured her. Rachel stood, shaking my hand. Then we're in business. We'll file everything in the next 48 hours. By Monday morning, your wife won't know what hit her. On the drive back, Michelle was quiet. I could feel the tension in the car. Finally, she sighed. James, are you sure about this? Once you go down this road, there's no turning back. I glanced at her. Michelle, she made me believe those kids were mine. For 9 years. She stole my life, my choices. She doesn't get to walk away without consequences. Michelle nodded slowly. All right, then let's make sure we do this right. I exhaled, gripping the steering wheel tighter. By the end of the week, Lucy's life was going to be unrecognizable, and I was going to make sure of it. The days leading up to Monday were a blur of preparation and cold, calculated moves. There was no hesitation left in me, no second-guessing. Lucy had spent 9 years lying to me, betraying me, building a life with another man while letting me raise his children. Now, it was my turn to take everything from her. By Friday evening, all the pieces were in place. I sat in my office, staring at the evidence Michelle and I had gathered, screenshots of Lucy's texts, pictures from the surveillance cameras, DNA test results, and the legal documents Rachel had prepared. Each file, each piece of proof, was another nail in the coffin of her perfect little lie. Michelle was sitting across from me, her expression unreadable. Are you sure you want to go through with this? I didn't hesitate. She deserves worse. Michelle nodded, her jaw tightening. Then let's make sure this is done right. Monday morning, the reckoning begins. I watched the clock on my office wall, my pulse steady. 10 a.m. Right now, Lucy was sitting at her desk, probably sipping coffee, completely unaware that her world was about to collapse. Rachel had made sure of the timing. The court had processed the documents over the weekend. At exactly 10, Lucy would receive the divorce papers, hand-delivered to her at work in front of her colleagues. But that was only the beginning. At the same time, every single person in Lucy's personal and professional life, her parents, her siblings, her friends, her co-workers, would be receiving a package. Inside, a curated selection of evidence exposing her affair. The text messages, the DNA results proving the kids weren't mine. A full breakdown of how she manipulated me into raising another man's children while she continued sleeping with her boss. There would be no way for her to talk her way out of this. No way to twist the truth. By the time she picked up her phone to call someone, everyone would already know. At 10:03 a.m., my phone vibrated. Lucy, incoming call. I let it ring. At 10:05 a.m., it rang again. Lucy, incoming call. I leaned back in my chair, exhaling slowly. She was panicking now. Good. I watched the screen as the calls kept coming, one after another. By 10:10, she had switched to texting. Lucy, James, please call me. Lucy, what is this? Lucy, you're overreacting. We need to talk. I smirked. Overreacting? She had lied to me for nearly a decade, and now she thought I was overreacting? I turned my phone face down on the desk. At 10:15, Michelle stepped into my office. It's done. I nodded. I know. She hesitated before speaking again. Her parents called your lawyer. I raised an eyebrow. And they wanted to know if this was a joke, if the DNA test was fake. I let out a dry laugh. Of course they did. Lucy had probably called them, crying, insisting that I was making everything up. Let them believe what they want, I said. The truth is the truth. Michelle nodded but didn't leave. She shifted slightly, looking like she wanted to say something. What is it? I asked. She hesitated, then sighed. You know she's going to show up here, right? I did. Lucy was predictable. She had always been someone who thought she could fix things with enough words, enough manipulation. But not this time. This time, there was nothing she could say that would change what I knew. I glanced at the clock again. 10:25. Any minute now. 10:30 a.m., the showdown. The elevator doors opened, and there she was. Lucy stormed into my office, her face red, eyes wild, gripping the divorce papers in one hand and her phone in the other. The moment she saw me, her expression shifted from anger to desperation. James, she gasped. We need to talk. I leaned back in my chair, completely calm. There's nothing to talk about, Lucy. She took a step closer, lowering her voice. Please. You can't just end everything like this. Not like this. I tilted my head. Not like this. How exactly should I have ended it? Should I have waited another 10 years? Should I have kept raising another man's children while you kept sneaking around behind my back? She flinched, but quickly recovered. I was going to tell you. I cut her off with a laugh, shaking my head. You were never going to tell me. If I hadn't found out, you would have kept lying to me forever. She opened her mouth, but I wasn't done. You didn't just cheat on me, Lucy. You stole from me. You stole my time, my love, my choices. You took away my right to decide if I wanted to be a father. You let me believe those kids were mine while you were screwing your boss in hotel rooms. Tears welled in her eyes. I never meant to hurt you. I let out a slow, humorless chuckle. You didn't care if you hurt me. She reached out as if to touch me, but I pulled back. Don't. Just don't. Lucy inhaled sharply, wiping at her face. What happens now? I stood up, fixing her with a cold stare. Now? You take your things. You take your kids, because they sure as hell aren't mine, and you get out of my house. She gasped. James, you can't just kick us out. Actually, I can, I said. Legally, the house is in my name. You can stay with Mark. Oh, wait. I smirked. I forgot. He's married. I'm sure his wife is just thrilled about all of this. She looked away, her breath hitching. I exhaled, suddenly feeling lighter. It was over. She had nothing left to say, and I had nothing left to give. Goodbye, Lucy. I turned away, sitting back down at my desk. After a long silence, I heard her footsteps retreat. The door opened, then closed. I let out a slow breath, running a hand through my hair. Then I looked up and found Michelle standing in the doorway, watching me. How do you feel? She asked quietly. I thought about it for a moment. Then I met her eyes and told her the truth. Free. Lucy was gone. She had left my office red-faced and shaking, But she hadn't broken down. Not yet. She still thought she had a way out, that she could twist this into something salvageable. She had spent years lying to me with a straight face, so why would she stop now? I knew she'd try again. That's why I had to make sure there was nothing left to salvage. By the time I got home that evening, the house felt different. It was the same place I had lived in for nearly a decade, but now it was tainted. I stood in the living room for a long moment, staring at the framed photos on the mantel. Pictures of a life I thought was mine. A wedding photo. Lucy and I on a beach in Hawaii, holding hands, smiling. A picture of the kids, except now, I couldn't even think of them as mine. My stomach twisted, anger flaring up all over again. This wasn't my home anymore. It was just a building full of ghosts. I grabbed a box and started pulling down the pictures, tossing them inside without hesitation. I didn't want them. I didn't want any of it. Halfway through, my phone rang. I glanced at the screen. Rachel. I answered immediately. Tell me it's done. It's done, she confirmed. Lucy's lawyer reached out. She's demanding time to talk things through, but I shut it down. The divorce is moving forward. There's nothing she can do to stop it. I exhaled, tension leaving my shoulders. And the house. She's fighting it, but legally, she has no claim, Rachel said. It's in your name alone. The courts will side with you. She'll have to move out, permanently. Good. She's still at the house, I muttered. But not for long. Rachel paused. James, do you want to be there when she leaves? I hadn't thought about it. Would I feel better seeing her pack up and walk out the door? Or would I just end up more furious, knowing that no matter how much I won, she had still taken so much from me? No, I said finally. I don't want to see her face ever again. Rachel hummed in approval. Smart. I'll have my team arrange a formal move-out date. You should go somewhere else for the night. I thought for a moment. Yeah, you're right. I hung up and immediately texted Michelle. Me, you home? She answered almost instantly. Michelle, yeah? What's up? Me. I need to get out of here. Can I crash at your place? There was no hesitation. Michelle, of course. Come over. I arrived at Michelle's place an hour later. It was the first time I had ever been to her house. For years, our relationship had been strictly professional, except for the past few weeks, where she had become the only person I could trust. She opened the door before I even knocked, stepping aside to let me in. You look like hell, she said, her voice softer than usual. I let out a short, humorless laugh. That bad, huh? She gave me a look, but didn't push. Come on, I made dinner. I followed her into the kitchen, suddenly realizing how exhausted I was. I hadn't eaten all day. We sat across from each other at the small dining table, the only sounds the clinking of silverware. Halfway through, Michelle set her fork down and met my gaze. How do you really feel? I chewed slowly, thinking. Angry. Relieved. Empty. She nodded, as if she understood completely. It'll take time. I exhaled. I don't even know what's next. Everything I thought I had is gone. Michelle hesitated. Then, carefully, she reached across the table and took my hand. I looked up at her, startled. You're not alone, James, she said quietly. Something about the way she said it made my chest tighten. For the first time in weeks, I felt something other than rage. Something warm. Something real. I tightened my grip on her hand. Thank you, I murmured. She smiled. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like maybe, just maybe, this wasn't the end. Maybe it was the beginning. The next morning, I woke up in a place that didn't feel like a graveyard. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't haunted by the weight of betrayal the moment I opened my eyes. No phantom whispers of Lucy's voice. No suffocating walls closing in on me, reminding me of the life I had lost. Michelle's guest room was simple, clean, and quiet. A stark contrast to the house I had just walked away from. The house where every corner was stained with lies. I sat up, rubbing a hand over my face. My mind felt clearer than it had in days. The chaos, the rage, the consuming need for revenge, it was all still there, but dulled. Contained. I had done what needed to be done. Now, I had to figure out what came next. I pushed myself out of bed, stretching, and followed the smell of coffee into the kitchen. Michelle was already there, dressed in a fitted sweater and jeans, her hair pulled back into a loose ponytail. She glanced up when she saw me, a small smirk tugging at her lips. Morning, stranger, she teased, sliding a steaming mug across the counter. Morning, I muttered, taking it. Didn't expect to sleep that well. She tilted her head. Maybe because you're not sleeping next to a liar anymore? I huffed a short laugh. Yeah, that might have something to do with it. Michelle leaned against the counter, watching me carefully. So, what's the plan now? I took a sip of coffee, letting the warmth settle in my chest. I have no damn idea, I admitted. She nodded, as if she had expected that answer. Well, let's start with the basics. You have a house you don't want to live in, a company to run, and you're officially divorced as of today. I blinked. Wait, what? She reached over to the kitchen table and picked up a thick envelope, tossing it to me. It came first thing this morning. Rachel had it expedited. It's official, James. You're a free man. I stared at the envelope, my fingers tightening around it. That was it. The final nail in the coffin. The legal, undeniable proof that Lucy and I were nothing to each other anymore. I exhaled slowly, setting the papers back down. It doesn't feel real. It will, Michelle said softly. With time. I glanced at her, noticing the way she was watching me, like she was waiting for something. For me to realize something. And maybe I finally was. For years, Michelle had been my right hand, my closest confidant. Always professional. Always there when I needed her. But now, there was something different between us. Something we had never acknowledged before. I met her gaze, holding it. She didn't look away. For a moment, there was only silence between us, heavy with things left unsaid. Then, finally, I spoke. How many? Michelle blinked. How many what? I set my coffee down, a smirk forming. How many kids should we have? She froze. For the first time since I had known her, Michelle looked completely caught off guard. Then, slowly, her lips curled into a smile. Well, she said, tilting her head, that depends. On what? On whether you're actually asking me, she said, stepping closer. Or if you're just trying to distract yourself. I held her gaze, my heartbeat steady for the first time in a long time. I'm asking. She studied me for a long moment, then let out a soft laugh, shaking her head. Then let's start with one and see how it goes. I grinned. Deal. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't thinking about Lucy. I wasn't thinking about betrayal. I wasn't thinking about the past at all. For the first time, I was thinking about the future. And for the first time, it actually looked bright. As I sat there, watching Michelle smile at me, something settled inside me, something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. I had spent so much time consumed by anger, by betrayal, by the need to make Lucy and Mark pay for what they had done. And yes, they had paid. But standing in the wreckage of my past, I realized something important. Revenge wasn't what set me free. Truth did. Knowing the truth, no matter how painful, had given me the power to take my life back, to reclaim my choices, to stop living a lie. Looking back, I could see the warning signs I had ignored for years, the little things I brushed aside, the blind trust one had given so freely. I wasn't stupid for believing in love, but I was naive for thinking betrayal could never happen to me. If there's one thing I'd tell anyone, especially those who have spent decades building a life with someone, it's this. Never assume loyalty, demand proof of it. Love should be built on trust, but trust should be built on actions, not just words. And if you ever find yourself in a situation like mine, lied to, betrayed, manipulated, remember this. You don't owe anyone your forgiveness, but you do owe yourself a future free from deception. Because no matter how much time you've lost, there's always time left to live the life you deserve.